adoption of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin overall. So stay nimble, but there's probably some good stuff happening to the upside. And there's always good stuff happening right here at the Liquid Lunch Studios when I'm joined by my co-host and the managing editor of Liquid Lunch TV, Frank Morano. Frankie.
Hello,
Buenos dias, senor. How are you today?
Buenos dias, indeed. This is an English-only program.
That's right.
Let's try and keep it above board here, John. All right, quite a bit of things happening in the news, and I was all set to tell you, really to congratulate the taxpayers of San Francisco for spending $600,000 to paint a wall white. By the way, yes, congratulations if you're a California taxpayer. I'm sure you feel that's money well spent. But some breaking news this morning right before the show that causes us to rip up the script and go to this very, very special issue on the latest, Frankly Speaking. This morning, unfortunately, we learned of the passing of Ross Perot at the age of 89 years of age, one of the greatest Americans who has ever lived. Let me reiterate that. Ross Perot passing away at the age of 89, one of the greatest Americans who has ever lived. Now, in 27 years of him becoming a late-night punchline and being mocked for his big ears, it's easy to forget about how great this man is and his contributions to American history, some of which are still being felt to this day. By the way, you know what book I was reading this week? But long before I knew Ross Perot was dying, a title in the making, Perot Movement Laid the Foundation to Take Back America. Where do we go from here? So, if you're a little younger, who is Ross Perot? For starters, he was a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, served in the Navy. He was a Navy veteran. What did he do after the Navy? Well, he went out and worked for IBM as a salesman. Built up an empire, a business empire, to become a self-made billionaire. Navy veteran to salesman to self-made billionaire. And how'd you like to compare your boss to this guy? You know what happened when his employees were held hostage in Iran? He went and got them out himself. He led a movement to go and rescue his own employees. Now, John and I have a great relationship. I have a great relationship with all my other employers.
No way I'm going to Iran.
I can assure you, none of them are going to Iran for me.
Not going to Iran, I can tell you that, my boy.
But Ross Perot led the movement to free these EDS employees. Then after that, gets very involved in the movement to free American POWs that were left behind in Vietnam.
Frank,
that's right.
Let me just say one thing. For those of you who don't know about Ross Perot's contributions to big data. You're hearing today about big data, about Big Brother, about all these privacy issues. Ross Perot was one of the forerunners in big data, and many of his innovations and unique points of invention are still employed today in processing of all kinds of transactions and big data searches. And not only he was diminutive physically, but he was a giant in many ways. And Ross Perot basically handed Bill Clinton the...
well, that's not true, and we'll get to that. In the 1980s, he became a leader, if not the leader, in the movement to get American POWs returned from Vietnam. Yes, that's right. A lot of people believe, including people like Senator Bob Smith, John LeBoutelier, and others, that your government made a deal with the Vietnamese to leave behind American POWs. And Ross Perot was there for their families as a philanthropist, as an organizer, and most importantly, as someone that kept the pressure on to free those American POWs. We don't know what their status is today, but without Ross Perot's advocacy in the 1980s, that totally would have been forgotten. Then 1992 comes around, and he goes on Larry King and says, you know what, if you want me to run for president and you don't want the country to get sold out to the right to George Bush or to the left to Bill Clinton, you go out and get me on the ballot yourself. And you know what? The American people responded in droves. He was the only candidate out there talking about a sensible trade policy. He was the only one talking about not getting involved in foreign intervention, like with the Iraq War. And a little deal called NAFTA, which George Bush and Bill Clinton couldn't agree more on, Ross Perot described this sound, which came to pass.
You can move your factory south of the border, pay $1 an hour for labor, hire a young 25, that's assuming you've been in business for a long time, you've got a mature workforce. Pay $1 an hour for your labor, have no health care. That's the most expensive single element in making a car. Have no environmental controls, no pollution controls, and no retirement. And you don't care about anything but making money, there will be a giant sucking sound going south. So if the people send me to Washington, the first thing I'll do is study that 2,000-page agreement and make sure it's a two-way street.
We did hear that sucking sound. Perot warned us, and yet America ignored him. We heard that sucking sound of manufacturing jobs disappear, and he was right. And it was that sucking sound that helped pave the way for Trump in 2016. And then the last thing I'll mention.
The sucking sound was coming out of the White House after that also. I'm just saying. You know
almost made it through it.
He
almost.
Did cause Bill Clinton.
Well, and then that's the last thing I'll say. After 19.5 million people responded, more votes than any third-party candidate since Theodore Roosevelt in 1912, a lot of people blame him for losing Bill Clinton. Now, for Bill Clinton getting elected. Let me repeat this, because you can go to people like Rush Limbaugh, you can go to people like William F. Buckley Jr., or you can go to people like Nate Silver on the left of 538. Read my lips. There is no evidence at all that Ross Perot cost George Bush the election. Okay. Let me repeat this.
Well, there is
no way to read the data that shows Ross Perot elected Bill Clinton.
Okay.
I'm going to miss him. I wish we'd elected him in '92. But because of the failures of all our leaders since then, that's part of the reason we got Donald Trump.
Many of our viewers at home, they're from that baby boomer generation, and
he was
independents and libertarians, and Ross Perot was a hero of the practical people, the purple people, the people that we're talking to, not all red or all blue. We're talking to people that are socially liberal on some issues and fiscally conservative. And those are the purple people, and that's the chord that Ross Perot struck in America. And Frank may say there's no evidence, or we can't read the evidence.
No, we can read it.
He made a great impact on Americana, and many of the things that he fought for were for freedom and to free people from other countries and a great America. Yesterday we talked about this Megan Rapinoe, the women's soccer captain, and they threw the flag on the ground, which is, completely embarrassing and disrespectful to the flag. Then you got Colin Kaepernick, the new CEO of Nike. He doesn't like the Betsy Ross flag, so he disrespects women entrepreneurs across the world because Betsy Ross was probably the most famous and first one of them. And Nike pulls the sneakers off the shelf. And like years ago, there's this famous picture of the farmer and his wife with the pitchfork. And if we don't stand up to some of this crap of disrespecting the flag, this is what the next century of the American Gothic painting could very well look like to us here in America. You know that famous painting. And this is what we could be in store for going into the new decade as Colin Kaepernick and Megan Rapinoe are completely disrespecting the flag and America and those great fighting men, women, and other of the armed forces who go out there and protect our freedoms every single day. Frankie, today, a couple of things I wanted to report on the market. I usually talk about the macros of what's happening, but a couple weeks ago I talked to you about Overstock.com. The stock price was kind of depressed. And there came out with a new application where you can now portably from your mobile phone, you can buy Bitcoin and Ether, which is a great development for a U.S. company. Innovator like Dr. Patrick Byrne. The stock was $10 just a few weeks ago. And today it's trading at nearly 17. You might want to take a look at it. And there is this wonderful phenomena going on right now with Overstock.com because there's so many short sellers thinking that the company's going in all the wrong directions, and they're artificially laying on the stock and knocking it down. And when the management and Dr. Byrne keep doing the things they've been doing and building fundamentals, there's a thing called a short squeeze when the shorts got it wrong, and the stock tends to run up the other way when they get caught in that, when they have their chestnuts in a vice a little bit. So keep your eye on Overstock.com. And there's another company, we're going to have the CEO on Woman Wednesday next week, and that Rayner InvestView and Company, INVU. We do not give financial advice here. I'm not telling you to go out and buy anything, but it's a very small stock, penny and a half or 2 cents, an educational company that you sign up for a very nominal amount, and they give you advice on how to learn to trade and how to do other things, and you join a community where you can get some great advice. So you may want to take a look at it for a little flyer, and if it's suitable for you, educate yourself, make yourself aware, but check out those two stocks and see what you think. I think they're headed in the right direction.
Absolutely.
I think the market's headed in the right direction, personally.
Well, it's going to be interesting after the job numbers that you reported that came out on Friday, the very stellar job numbers, if the rationale for the Fed cutting rates disappears now. All we heard was, all right, the economy's slowing down, Oh, by the way, here's 220,000 jobs created in June. Maybe we don't need to cut rates.
Final thought on that. In this month, there's a thing called the birth-death model, where the federal government just assumes that a whole bunch of companies, seasonal companies, are going to be formed. So they assume jobs are formed. It's kind of quirky. So I think the Fed may cut rates at the end of July. It's 100% priced into the bond market. You stay right there. Joe Jaffe, the author of Built to Suck, next.